Hi, welcome to Maggie Heron Cake. This video is for you if you already bake your cake and then whenever you wanna decorate your cake and stack your cake layers, it becomes all wonky and you're wondering why. And we'll see the not so good way that will lead your cakes to becomes all wonky because you have like all uneven cake layers and then your cake fillings all oozing out, or just like, you know, it's just not straight and flat like this. And what will be the good way or the best way to have your best possible chance to create even cake layers and crumb coated with buttercream like this, that will lead you to have a better chance to have a smooth cake like this. So let's get started. The first question you want to ask yourself is, how warm is your cake? If the cake is still warm, sometimes it feels cool to the touch, but inside it's still pretty warm. So when you cut your cake layers and then you start decorating quite soon after baking, the buttercream that you use is gonna get all melty and therefore your cake is gonna get all wonky. So to avoid that, I like to bake the day before starting cake decorating. It just leads to less stress and calmer baking. I enjoy it more. And what I do is cover my cake after baking, and then, well, we cover it so that the cake doesn't get dried. And I put it in the fridge overnight. And let's say you ask, Maggie, but I want to decorate that day. I just want to get this done. Then what you can do is put your cake in the freezer to speed up the cooling process. And cold cake is so much easier to handle. It cuts easier and you handle it, like you stack better, because it's like you start with, not a wonky cake that's really hard to handle, because warmer cake it tends to flex a lot more. So that's what you can do. Put it in the freezer. You want a faster cooling. And so always start with cold cake. It makes your life so much easier. So that's tip number one. The second question that you want to ask, even before you start cake decorating, what are the cake base that you're going to use where your cake is going to sit on? Do you have a flat cake base that your cake sit on? If you're just grabbing your plate and then thinking, okay, I'm going to put my cake on here, and then, after we cut it and all, and then trying to cake decorate, you realize that the perimeter of the cake, like the outer, like it's hitting your scraper, and it's just so much harder to decorate your cake because you don't have a flat cake surface. So what you would like to have is a flat cake base, something like this. This is a disposable one with cardboard on the bottom, and the top is laminated. It's like, food cake circles. It's flat, which what is this cake is sitting on, that is making you have an easier time when you're trying to smooth your cake, because all the cake base surface is flat. There is nothing interfering with your cake scraper when you're trying to smooth your cake. And if you're asking me, oh, Maggie, I would like to decorate it directly on my cake stand. That's good. You can do that. You can decorate directly on your cake stand, but make sure your cake stand also have a flat surface like this. This is a good cake stand where you want to put your cake and then smooth your cake, because it's easy to decorate your cake with a flat base like this. Some cake stands has rim surface like this on the perimeter, like the outside part, that you realize when you're trying to decorate it or smooth your cake, this rim that has a higher height than the rest of your cake stand, your cake scraper is hitting this cake base, your rim, that is making it harder to decorate your cake on. This one might be okay if your cake is small like this, because you could, anyway, when you're trying to smooth your cake, it's angle it like this. This doesn't interfere much, but when you have a bigger cake, it will hit your rim when you're trying to smooth your cake, which is just making it a lot harder. So make sure that your cake stand is flat, and some other cake stand also kind of concave like this, which also hard to make your cake smooth, to smooth your cake or to decorate it, because it's concave like the plate that we have. It's making it harder to decorate it. Okay, I mean, it's possible if you are a bit, you know, like you do this often enough, but you know, if you don't do this often and then you're trying to decorate, like it just leads to frustration. Why? If you can avoid that, why not, right? So always have your flat surface for your base where your cake is sitting on. And third question you want to ask yourself, this is all before we start, you know, stacking your cake, right? Is what type of buttercream that you're going to use. The common mistakes and then what makes cake smoothing a lot harder is when you use crusted buttercream. Okay, this one is non-crusted buttercream is, okay, let me explain. White crusted buttercream, for example, like American buttercream, after you apply it on cupcakes or cake or anything, over time it will form a crust. So it's gonna dry out a little bit on the surface, and when you're trying to smooth your cake, once it's dried out, you cannot really smooth it out further. So you have to work really quickly if you're working with a crusted buttercream like American buttercream. And when you're still trying to learn how to do all of this, stacking and smoothing all your cake, the last thing you want to do is have something that dried out so quick that by the time it gets crusted and dried, you couldn't even like smooth it. So avoid all that hassle, avoid all those frustration by having a non-crusted, the one that buttercream that doesn't crust. So in the link in the description, you could download the recipe for the easy buttercream that is non-crusted and it's delicious, and it only take 10 minutes, the same time where you preparing American buttercream also. And I just love it so much because it's not greedy, it's smooth. I love it so much. So that's number 3 is consideration of your buttercream. The type of buttercream that is gonna make you easier to smooth is the one that's not crusted. When you cut your cake, you don't want to just stab it in like that. It's really hard to gauge like where you're going when you do this. It's kind of really hard to create an even cake layers. Instead, what you want to do is holding your knife on the cake surface like this, so sort of like a perpendicular to it, and slowly sort of like scoring it, keep the knife even, and then each time you're scoring it, you rotate the cake a little bit, little by little bit, until you cut little by bit from the outer surface, and keep rotating your cake. This way you can maintain your even straight knife. Therefore, you're going to have your even cake layers when you do this. You see, like it's easy to see whether your knife is straight or not, because when you're just stabbing it, it's really hard to see if you are even inside or not, whether your knife is straight or not. Like it's easy to sort of like go up and down kind of thing, like you're going in blind. So that's why you never want to do this. Instead, you want to cut your cake sort of holding it like that, perpendicular. Therefore, cutting your cake into 2, having an even cake layers is so much easy. And look at that even cake layers that we got out of that. It's beautiful, right? So remember to never stab forward, but hold your knife perpendicular to the cake and then cut it on the surface as you rotate. Now, once you cut your cake layers and have the even cake layers, you want to put your buttercream as inside the filling between the cake layers, right? And when you put your buttercream on the cake, you can spread it out around to trying to have a uniform layer of buttercream, right? And as you spread around, notice how you're handling your palette knife. You want to angle your palette knife a little bit so that you can sort of scrape off your buttercream, and just using a light pressure to try to smooth out the layers so that you have a uniform thickness. What you don't want to do is starting pressuring it really hard and not angling your palette knife. So when you keep your palette knife flat like that and with the pressure and then you just slide it off, some of the buttercream chunks can come off because it's just that flat spatula on the cake is just normal when you buttercream fall off like that. So what you always want to do is angling your spatula so you scrape it off when you're angling it. So when you want to go to the left, you're angling it a little bit to the left, and then when you're doing to the right, you're angling it a little bit to the right. Okay? One thing you could do is to keep your palette knife steady and still angling it like that, but use the turntable as to your advantage. So when you rotate your turntable, your spatula is naturally going to scrape off some of the buttercream as you move your turntable. Because as you put your spatula just pretty much steady like that and then you turn, it's naturally going to scrape off all those buttercream, therefore creating a uniform layer. Now the next common mistake is usually people are getting so excited about putting any cake fillings. So here I use raspberry compote, any kind of jam, lemon curd, or anything that is, or caramel, anything that is soft, right? And it's wet, it's kind of wet. And they're just like putting it around the cake like this, getting so excited. Okay, okay. And then, they're gonna put like some buttercream, or not, however you like your cake. And when they layer the cake, what happens? The fillings are oozing out. You see that? And this is really hard for creating a smooth or any stable cake because when your fillings are oozing out, it's unstable. So when you press it or when you're doing the stacking, the more it's gonna ooze out. If you create like a very, very thin, you might be okay. But this is what happens when then you have to, it's just a mess. It's just wobbly, your cake wobbly and unstable. So what should you do instead? You want to make sure you have a border. So what kind of border? Not like a wall, it's like a buttercream border to lock in your filling so none of the filling is gonna ooze it out and create unstable cake layer. So that is because buttercream when it's cold, it's hardened, right? So none of the wet filling is gonna get ooze out outside the cake layers, and then therefore you're gonna create a stable cake. So that's what you want to do. I'm going to show you two ways how we're going to create the border of the buttercream before we're going to put the fillings inside so that your filling's not going to leak out, right? Here we're just going to scoop up some buttercream using your spatula and putting it around your the outside of the cake, creating kind of like a blob of border like that. This is kind of slower kind of process, but I find that sometimes I'm too lazy to get a piping bag and I just sort of like do this. So you can definitely do this if you don't have a piping bag, don't have a Ziploc bag, anything that you need to pipe out the buttercream around, and you can just use this method instead. It's a little bit takes longer, but hey, different methods have its pros and cons, right? And also you see the height of your border is not uniform because, well, you are human, you are imperfect, so there might be a chance of some of the fillings might be oozing out. So if this is your first time, I just recommend using your piping bag, as you're gonna see in the second method that I'm gonna show you. But if you're really like me, that sometimes you're just lazy and then like you feel like, okay, I've done this several times, I know this is good enough, then just use this method. You see that I'm moving my spatula, I angled my spatula kind of like upside down and sort of like trying to smooth out the sides. That's how you want to do it also when you're trying to create that wall. In general, that's how you hold your spatula when you're trying to smooth your sides. Now the center, create a deeper well, pressing the scraping off the center of buttercream a little bit more so that I'm making sure that I have enough height for my filling so that it's not going to ooze out. Once I'm happy with that, then I'm just gonna put my fillings here. I'm putting my raspberry compote and my lemon curd. Once you're happy with your fillings and you put your next cake layers, and you see, because you have the buttercream border, now your compote or jam, any kind of your cake fillings are not going to ooze out. So I'm just making sure that my layers are good and nothing of the compote are oozing out. So next I'm going to show you the other way, using a piping bag to pipe a buttercream border. This is probably the easier way. If you don't have a piping bag, here is a nice substitute, using a Ziploc bag. And I like to put it in a cup or a glass, actually a glass like this, and put your Ziploc bag inside. Ziploc bags are convenient because, well, everyone has a Ziploc bag, right? So the way that I like to do it is, because Ziploc bag, the shape is not really like a piping bag. Just make sure that you put the one of the corner inside your glass. So your sharp corner, put it inside your glass so that you're sort of mimicking a piping bag that way. And then peel it out, so you making sure that none of your buttercream's gonna get outside of your Ziploc bag, which is kind of gonna create a mess. And your glass is gonna help you to scoop up your buttercream without, it's just easier without any, mess or anything. So you can use spatula to push your buttercream inside and then continue filling your buttercream inside the bag. Once you're done with that, you want to press out your Ziploc bag, trying to close it, and press out any air or anything, and then zip your bag close. Next, you want to fold your Ziploc bag so that you don't have the extra flaps, and then push the buttercream toward that particular corner, and then remember to twist your Ziploc bag so that it's easier when you're trying to push your buttercream outside the hole that you're creating right now. By using scissors, snip out a small hole, and therefore you can pipe your buttercream. Okay, so that's the way to do it. Now you have your Ziploc bag as your piping bag, and then continue putting your buttercream on the cake, and then creating a border, and also putting the fillings again. Here I have 4 cake layers, so I'm just gonna speed up the process, but you know what to do already, that you're gonna have your buttercream border, therefore your filling is not gonna ooze out. Okay? You can just create 2 cake layers if you don't really want a tall cake, or you don't really need it, or you can continue with 3 cake layers and then 4 cake layers. In general, I like a tall cake, that's why I like to have 4 cake layers. Here I would like to also take the time to thank the paid subscriber and donor who made free video like this possible, because without your support this cannot be possible. Thank you. Okay, onto my final cake layers, and last but not least is that we would like to crumb coat the cake. What does that mean? Is that we're putting a thin layer of buttercream throughout all of it, the top and also the sides of the cake. This way, any crumbs of your cake and then mixed with the thin layer of buttercream, it's gonna lock in all the crumbs. So once you create a very thin layer, so notice how I'm holding my spatula to smooth the side, is that you want to hold your spatula so that scraping off like that. It's just easier to smooth out your sides of the cake. Okay, and it doesn't have to be perfect, anything, just as long as you have a thin layer of buttercream and then locking it in a crumb. And next, this is important, is that we want to chill it, because when we put it in the fridge, the buttercream is going to get colder and a little bit hardened, and therefore locking in. That's just the locking in process happens, right? When it's hardened, and therefore your crumb is not going to go anywhere. Throughout this process, if your cake gets too warm, during the stacking and layering, you notice that your filling's still oozing out, don't worry, just try your best to smooth it out, and then just put your cake in the fridge. And this way, once all the buttercream is a little bit hardened, then you take it out and then you can put a more layer of buttercream, soft buttercream, to make sure that you lock in all those fillings so it doesn't get oozed out. I hope this video is useful, giving you examples of what not to do during cutting and layering your cake for your cake decorating, and what to do instead and why, right? The reason that you give this example is like, oh, right. So I hope it is useful, and if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I really appreciate your support. Thank you.